So Wendy, I would love to know a little bit about you. I'd love you to introduce yourself and to tell me how you got into the world of conservation. And also I'd love to know about your quiver trees a little bit.
So my name is Wendy Foden, and I've always loved nature. It took me a while to find my way into the career in nature conservation, but I landed up studying in Cape Town a little later on in my life, and stumbled into the world of climate change, initially not believing that it even existed, but it was a very cool research project, and so I took it on and stumbled upon, and I guess I didn't see what was creeping up was the distress at what was unfolding around the coral reefs and around first mammal extinction and just the suffering of what was happening. And then secondly, my own sense of having to fix it all, being in this position of, being able to do something and then just doing too much. And that's when depression and burnout stalked me and knocked me down. And so I had a real taste of some of the symptoms yourself. Some of these difficult things, and it was a very painful time. And I had to really stare in the face my emotional aspects of what I was doing and why I was doing it. So I went on. I slowly recovered and went on to do more of this work. Went back 20 years later to see my trees, and there'd been mass mortality of many of these incredible trees, incredible places that I loved, and really nobody, they were just dying quietly in these empty open places and nobody witnessing it. And this call to witness it for, just witness it and take it out, and it's heavy and it's a lot, and then there's the day-to-day of conservation and raising money and all of that. So I hit another really tough burnout, and through that process to really engage with the ways of actually supporting myself, the ways to come back, and the way to support my students too. And that's really sort of spurned, I think as any good crisis does, it spurns as you recover a whole lot of realizations and a strength to go forward. And it was during that time that I was so very fortunate to stumble into one of Rochelle's retreats.
Okay. I'm Dr. Rochelle Calvert, and I, by a name behind my name, am an eco-psychologist, mindfulness teacher, and somatic healer. All of that's a very fancy way of saying I tend to inner ecosystems and support people to be in relationship with outer ecosystems, with their inner ecosystems. And just to share maybe a little bit of my own journey of why I even care so deeply about this work. Many therapists go into the world of therapy having been through their own experiences and knowing they didn't receive the support they needed. And I am part of that community and experienced many iterations of pain and suffering and trauma in early years and adolescence and early adulthood. And in that, coming into the field, I realized that people were helping people, which is what I wanted to do and felt called to the call of helping suffering on the earth, that we were trying to solve really big emotional challenges without the kind of support that probably really was needed. And so in my own journey, I actually had a practice of being outside every single day, but my work was happening in the office. And through a breakdown said, oh, why can't I just be outside? Why are we not outside? Why is the whole field not outside? Why are we practicing this in a closed room? This actually isn't the way it's been done for thousands of years when you look at healers in indigenous lineages. So that has led me in this path forward of recognition that there is a way that we can return to healing our inner ecosystem with the support of the earth, and it reclaims the reciprocity of that relationship. And so then we can go forth and care for the earth a little bit better, or maybe a lot better.
But could you give some kind of sense about what the mental health status of people that are involved in conservation work is?
I can answer the first part. So, trying to bring this emotional aspect into a science faculty. So I have to admit to having done a little guerrilla teaching. Not the animal kind, even though it's conservation. So I teach conservation leadership as part of a MSc at UCT. And, you cannot lead unless you are self-aware. You need a level of self-awareness. And so we move into this space. And once you get into the felt sense, self-awareness means examining how you are inside. And that's where you find some of the difficult emotions that are, in fact, what drive you to be there. It's the anger at what's happened that's got you there, being passionate about what you're doing. It's your sadness that's got you really persevering when things get tough. So then we start to go into these spaces, which really are what orientate us, what make us do this work. And so I've had to go towards the work of Joanna Macy and draw on the work of Rochelle to help guide people. So yeah, I'd say we are negligent in not giving our students the kinds of tools needed to support us in this field. So yeah, I'd really like it not to be guerrilla teaching. I've slipped it in. I didn't tell them. Now I'm getting bolder, and I've taken it to these science conferences, and it generally is much loved. So I would love it to see it growing in recognition and helping us to take it into universities.
Yeah, I don't have specific data, although I would love to know if there's a study that does exist in real time around if we've studied our climate scientists and their mental health. That seems like a very important question to have answered. But my sense is, having met a fair amount of individuals who have come on retreats with me, who have reached out to me, who've sat with me, that pain is so significant. And so whatever the means are to bring us in, and there is some very, I think I call it common sense research that's happening about nature and mental health. Most people know this when I say it, but there's studies that show that when we go outside for just 5 minutes, and again, this wouldn't be doing any of our climate work, this would just be enjoying the lovely breeze or the sun or the water. 5 minutes, your heart rate will slow, your facial muscles will relax, and your prefrontal cortex will quiet. All of that really good for buoying well-being, right? So even if we were to just take a 5-minute nature break, that alone would be beneficial. We also know birdsong and water will increase your mood and your alertness, your ability to focus, your ability to be happier. Just a few minutes of that. We also know that if you spend 15 minutes outside, your stress hormone, cortisol, will decrease significantly. It's just 15 minutes, right? We know, because I'm going up the scale of time spent outside, just enjoying being outside. Hour and a half, less preoccupied with your problems or the overwhelm that you're facing. And if we spent 5 hours a month outside, the research is showing us overall we're just happier. We're just more content. So all of this to me, again, feels like a bit common sense because most people will report this kind of thing. But good to know that the science is starting to back us up in terms of how we can ally with these ways of being with the earth to support our well-being.
And I'd like to add that so much of being a conservationist seemed to be sitting behind a computer, answering emails, sitting in online meetings, sitting in meetings, answering more emails, blah, blah, blah. And even, when we came into a field thinking that we would get to be with nature and in nature, so much of the time we're absolutely confined to offices and not getting out. And I think especially for us who are so nature orientated, it kills us. It saps the life out of us. So remembering that and very consciously putting nature time in the day, I found it makes a huge difference. I also think as a little bit of I don't know, less conventional is, as conservationists, maybe we've earned a little bit of credit to kind of rest back on nature extra. We're working for it. Maybe we can relax back, and we get so much from being in nature. Maybe, we're earning a little of that. Maybe we can rely on it a bit extra specially. Yeah.
I like that. Thanks, Wendy. I have a daughter who is, she's a teenager, she's 14, and she comes home from school and she closes herself up in her room and plugs in her music. Very nice music, but she's totally disconnected from the outside world, and it's very hard to get her outside of her room to go for a walk in nature. And I just wonder about the general disconnection from nature and how one reconnects those people that might not even recognize that they're disconnected. Is that something that you can respond to?
Yeah, not alone in younger humans having less impulse for outside. I think that I say that lightly, but it's also very true. I think there's some research that says most youth are spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% of their time in front of a screen, less even about anything else outside or with other people. And so it's significant. But being able to take an opportunity to spend more time outside, and how do we encourage people to see that there's value in that? It can start in very simple ways, and I think meeting people where they are inside is actually a really good place to start. Like, getting people excited about plants in their house, or opening their window, or looking out at the sky for a few minutes, I think goes a long way, right? Beautiful if we can come out into an immersive space where we're surrounded by it, but a lot of us are not. And if our work dictates that we're behind a computer quite a bit, or just the nature of how we're kind of living, I think a little bit at a time, just inviting people into what would it be like to take care of a plant? What would it be like to learn about that beautiful food that you're eating? Where did it come from today? Or can you go to your local park? Can you begin to connect with a place that's near you that actually begins to tell you, this is the land that I am a part of? And I think it only just takes a few of those moments that somebody begins to remember, because it's within us. This isn't not already here. It's just been forgotten. Oh, that was so nice. They have a taste of my mood felt better. So it's like, of course I'm going to go outside now for just a few more minutes. And so I think it's the small little steps back towards, because it's actually part of how we function best as humans. So it's just reawakening that, I think, a little bit, so that once a taste of that comes back in, people want to follow it and return to it in a way that's really, the earth is kind of guiding them back in, So, yeah, that would be my offering for that. Do you have something to add, Wendy?
I guess just that some of our viewers would probably be closer to that generation and might have some great ideas. I know, for example, that my nephew is hooked on online games, and some of them are around discovering new planets with incredible creatures and the really beautiful islands and virtual reality. So maybe there's some creative ways of bringing people back into the love of nature full circle. So yeah, Game on, challenge.
Rochelle, can you share anything with me about the whether there's been much of an uptake of ecotherapy in the mental health world?
Yeah. Being in the States, in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, we're starting to see a surge of interest. And this is coming because people who are wanting to study mental health are this younger generation that recognize what line we're on with the climate. And there's no way that that's not infusing their decision to try to help people deal with that. So in the world of psychology now, we're even having to address people coming in and telling us about their climate experiences. They're not just climate scientists, but we're all in this experiencing the after effects of what it means to be with these devastating experiences. And people have anxiety from being through major events and have grief and loss over, homes that they now no longer have. And these are real, these cause very traumatizing and real mental health issues to persist for people. So we have a whole group of people who are wanting to come into this field to study specifically how do we help that, and wanting to study earth-based practices that actually return us, not just sit and talk about the mind for a bit or how our family impacted our experience of mental health, but to realize these pain points are common at this point in time, and how can we return to the earth? And so the ability to have ecotherapeutic practices and different types of those that feel able to kind of reclaim a safety or a sense of well-being back with the earth again and not being so overwhelmed by it has been so important. And so many different creative ways that that's being taught in ecotherapy. We have a whole realm of ecotherapeutic art that's happening. People are going out on vision quests. People are going and receiving equine therapy, and many different ways that those therapeutic practices are expanding and becoming so much more I would say popular, but more like needed, because I don't want to just sit and talk about it. I want to know that I have a real life experience of feeling better and reconnected with the earth and re-energized that it's safe to be on this earth again. And just thinking about the research that some of the students you might be doing when you're in the middle of studying these very important things, how much are we actually in that moment putting our bare feet back on the earth, or touching the water and remembering that this, water is giving life to us right now, and just taking a moment to appreciate it. It could be lots of little moments as we're in that work. And I know that the therapy students that I support in the States, I'm an ecotherapy graduate professor, and it's just finding all of those beautiful ways that are unique to each one of us, whatever our profession, wherever we're at, to come back in to find these sweet and simple ways to reconnect with the earth.
So Wendy, if you imagine that you're speaking to your students, or there are going to be lots of students that are going to watch this after you've spoken, what kind of advice would you give them? What would you tell them to guide them through this kind of experience?
Well, I'd say that it's really important to pay attention to how you're feeling. It certainly wasn't part of my expectations around studying and working in conservation that I would really have to deal with my feelings at all. But I think things to pay attention to is, I would get so stressed that I wouldn't be able to stop. I wouldn't be able to sleep. I'd still grind my teeth. My fingernails are gone. Just feeling overwhelmed, like I can't stop, like I don't have time to talk to people. Just a stress that on one level is natural, maybe before an exam, but going on for a long time, it really brought me to a point of extreme anxiety and later to depression. And I've really struggled with mental health issues. I think that that's something that really needs to be recognized, that people, students, young folk need to actually pay attention to the signs of when things are getting too much. You can't really step up and do anything until you recognize those aspects. And I guess it's also something to recognize in your colleagues, and for those watching, in your students, in those that you lead, to just be aware of the signs of these things, and to learn to take care of yourself. That's not something that you'll be necessarily taught by as part of your syllabus, but it really is an important part of learning. So I think some level of stress is normal, and it helps us to perform better. But now we know that we've got nature to turn to, but then there'll be times when it gets too much and it interacts with our other stresses and traumas in our lives. All of us face challenges, and there is a time when we need to know when to go for help, when it's too much. So I'm going to pass over to our psychologist to talk a little about that.
Yeah. So some immediate signs, much like you were just naming, Wendy, would be physical signs that the body is beginning to feel quite contracted all the time, or you're doing things like grinding your teeth, or you find it that your body is kind of not doing its normal things that it should be doing, resting well, or being able to eat, or things of that nature, that when too much stress or too much overwhelm has happened, the body will send you some signals that says, hey, things are a little out of balance here. Other signs from an emotional and a mental standpoint might be that you're having trouble focusing. You feel very scattered. You feel very easily overwhelmed. Somebody puts a demand on your plate, and you're like, I just can't do that. It's too much. And it, in other times, might actually feel like a very normal demand that someone has asked you. So that's an indicator things could be too much. If your mind is kind of overwhelmed with thoughts that become very fixated, or almost hyper-focused on and the next, and the next, and the next, and I can't even focus on the next thing that's happening because I'm so far down the line. That's not a healthy state of mind. That leads to overwhelm. So, and emotionally, right? Any emotions, as Wendy was saying, the emotional experience that we have throughout the day are so many, but when we're in the midst of a lot of intense emotion, it will tend to build. And so signs of that might be that all of a sudden you find that you're quite emotional in many different ways that you aren't normally, like extra anxious, or maybe very, very sad, heavy sadness, or quick to anger, like than you might normally be. All of those would be things that would be saying, hey, it's a little too much right now. I need to think about getting some help. And then the final thing that I would name that is often a sign that it's really too much in our inner world that we need help with is we're acting on that in ways that aren't helpful, like using substances or engaging in behaviors that aren't really helpful or maybe harmful to us in some way. This could be everything from needing to check out on your devices too much, or not sleeping, behaviors that aren't healthy that will lead to more overwhelm and potential burnout and collapse. So those would be indicators to think about and to reflect on as you start to see. There are moments where you could take care of yourself before we get to the next, but if many of these come on, that would be a very good time to seek out support in the mental health community here, and maybe checking in and seeing if there are some ecotherapists, and I believe there are a few here in South Africa to connect to.
And I'd just add, remember to keep a lookout for your fellows, your colleagues, and your friends. Sometimes we can't see it ourselves, and you need to check up and take care of others.
Thank you both very, very much.
So I think many people, particularly early in their careers, are struggling to find their way and what is really meaningful in contributing to getting us to the end point, and to really make change. And it's hard to work out what is the contribution you can make, one that is not so big that you can't do it and that you lose hope and that you burn out, and not so small that you don't find it meaningful. And I think one of the things that a good leader can do is really to help people to work out what that role is and pull followers together behind a common purpose. One of the key things to recognize is that we are a team, that everybody's in this together, that we walk on the shoulders of all the people who've already come and gone, and there are so many that are out in front of us. And then, of course, there's all the people around the world, all the folk who are working in conservation in Africa and the world. So I think really important is to recognize we don't do it alone. We're a team. And that gives us strength. You don't have to do the whole thing, and you're allowed to do the bit that you love, and that's going to be the bit you do best anyway. So I think that's a key thing, to give people permission to really be themselves, express themselves, do what they love, and to pull that together towards the common good and move us forward. This diversity is strength. Works in every way.
I really love that. Thanks, Wendy. Rochelle, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would just add diversity is strength is a beautiful phrase. And, the beautiful Joanna Macy, who is a beautiful body of work that reminds us we're not supposed to do this alone. And we need different ways that when we're in it together, that we're really in it together, that we're remembering we are grateful, we're remembering we can lean on each other when it's hard, we're remembering that we're, as a collective, likely to see things in very different ways rather than just through our own lens. And we will come up with new and more creative ways to be able to go to the common good or the goal that we have together. And so I think the collective cannot be underscored enough. This earth has survived and thrived because of its collective goodness, which is what many of the beautiful scientists are studying and understanding more about. So that rings true for us as humans too. We're equally part of those beautiful systems. So finding the ways that collaborative way of caring for one another and the good work we love is so important.
So I want to know how accepted this kind of work is in the science world. And a question, I don't know, it's very broad, but